Welcome to the World Football Summit podcast, the show for football industry leaders who want to stay ahead of the game. We bring you the latest insights, trends, and stories from the experts driving innovation and progress in sports business worldwide. Join us as we dive deep into the ideas and initiatives transforming the world of football. From sustainability and innovation to player development, fan engagement, and everything in between. Our goal is to unite the global football industry and drive positive change and progress. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, CMO at World Football Summit. You know, one of the things that excited me most when I joined World Football Summit and started the podcast was being able to interview those legendary leaders who are pushing the football industry forward. Today is one of those episodes, as I get to sit down with Peter Moore, former CEO at Liverpool Football Club, and someone with a remarkable career in the sports, video game, and entertainment industry. Peter is also a confirmed speaker for World Football Summit Americas, taking place on June 5th and 6th in Mexico City. And I thought it would be a wonderful opportunity to learn from him and his amazing career. Peter and I talk about fan engagement and what the football industry can learn from the video game space. We obviously cover his time at Liverpool Football Club and his accomplishments. Then, Peter gives a masterclass on the sports business model, the role of content, and the future of football. And we finish up by talking about the social side of football and his current project, Santa Barbara Sky FC. Do I really need to convince you to stick around for this one? Before going into it though, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice and share it with your industry colleagues. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, where every week we send updates, trends, and everything that goes on at our events. You can find the link in the show notes. Remember, we have events in London, in Mexico, in Sevilla. You can check it all out on our website, and hopefully, we'll meet you there. And now, nothing else from me. Let's welcome Peter Moore to the World Football Summit podcast. Well, Peter, I'm really glad to welcome you to the World Football Summit podcast. Before going into everything that we're going to talk about, I need to get this out of the way, which is to thank you on behalf of the entire team, not only because you will be joining us for World Football Summit Americas, our first ever edition there, but also because there is a quote that we use across all of our presentations that comes from your panel, saying something along the lines that, in a few years' time, we would all go back and say, hey, we met at World Football Summit, and that friendships and relationships are born here. So, above all, thank you.
My pleasure, and completely true as well.
Anyway, Peter, I think you don't need an introduction. Everybody listening would probably know who you are. But I always like to ask my guest, why? Why did you decide to pursue a career in the football industry?
I'm not sure I decided to pursue one. I was certainly pursued, but football has been part of my life since the first game my dad took me to Liverpool at Anfield in 1959. And Liverpool beat Leyton Orient 4-3. I was 4 years of age. I can still smell, see, hear everything, although I couldn't see much as a 4-year-old at Anfield during those days. And football has always been my North Star, both personally and professionally. I've been very fortunate to have been involved in the game, whether it's video games at EA Sports or Reebok and obviously more recently at Liverpool Football Club. It's always been an important part of my life. It has steered me in the direction of being able to have a certain level of success in my career because of football. And I believe, and certainly having experienced this at Liverpool, it is by far the most powerful platform for actually doing good in the world if used correctly. And by that, I mean bringing joy and hope, sadness sometimes, but everything to the world. Requires no understanding of the language. You just need a ball and maybe a couple of sweaters at either end, and off you go.
Yeah, I mean, wow. I love that we started this conversation, Peter, because this is something that we truly believe at World Football Summit. And we'll speak about this later. But definitely we believe there's a business side of football, but there's a social side of football as well. I'm going to speak about that as well. I guess before football, though, you did have an amazing career related to video games, entertainment. So I guess I want to start with, because it's a question that I've had on my mind. Do video games actually compete, or are they a complement to the football industry? Because one would say on the one hand, they compete for the attention of the fan, but I've heard so many leaders speak about how many fans today actually become fans of the club thanks to a video game because they like this player and they play with that player on the video game. So what's your thought on that?
It's absolutely that video games bring more fans into the game, more knowledge, more passion, more excitement, more commitment. And in particular, in the last 20 years with online and the ability to interact with people all around the world. Obviously, the game that has made the most impact is the game formerly known as FIFA and the game now, EA Sports FC. And when I was president of EA Sports, when I joined Electronic Arts in 2007 to become president, we started then as we were moving very much into the world of online and digital to think about how we could broaden the reach of not just playing a game of football for 90 minutes, albeit 5 minutes in a video game, but understanding the game better, understanding the game's impact, the players all around the world, the clubs that have competed hundreds of years throughout Europe and South America and Asia. And we developed a concept called Ultimate Team. And I think this one mode within this particular game broadened the reach and horizons of millions, if not tens of millions of young players, young video game players who started to understand football in Lithuania and Slovenia and Slovakia and Colombia and Ecuador and Paraguay and who are the best fullbacks, because Ultimate Team, as I know you know, developed this concept of I'm going to find the best players in the world and I'm going to find value and put my best players against your best players. And this sparked a massive interest in the game itself. And we tracked this at Electronic Arts. We tracked game engagement and knowledge of the game, knowledge of clubs and their history. And we also asked, do you go outside and play football much more? Do you go to football, real football matches, not virtual football matches much more? And the answer was overwhelmingly, yes, I do. So I think that we can look at EA Sports FC, the game formerly known as FIFA, as, if you will, the gold standard of how the virtual and digital world not only informs the real world, but accelerates the real world. And I think that football would be a lesser sport without what video games have done for it over the past 20 plus years.
I like that concept, accelerate sports, no? And then I was looking at comparisons, at the end of the day, there's similarities in the sense that in terms of the loyalty of whether you're a fan of a team or a fan of a video game. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've seen is that once you've bought into, let's say, a FIFA, it's really hard that you change video game throughout the year. It's very hard unless there's something, very wrong there. But the difference is, to me, that video games have been able to actually, call it like this, is monetize the support from those fans, which is something that football is kind of like the holy grail, How do we monetize the support from the fan? Everybody's talking about that. So from your perspective, are there any lessons that football properties can actually learn from how video games have been able to monetize the support from their fans?
In the world of video games, we look at life as an inverted funnel. So think of a funnel like this. And at the very top, it's about acquisition. It's about how can you get to know your fans, your supporters, your gamers. How do you get to know them, get some information about them? And then how do you engage them? How do you make them feel part of your family? How do you keep them coming back every day to watch content or engage with your game or with your football club? And then as the funnel narrows a little bit, which it will do, how do you monetize? How do you bring those fans commercially into your world and start monetizing them, which is always in football a little bit of a dirty word when you start talking in these terms to football supporters, but that's what it is. So this simple concept of AEM, acquire, engage, monetize. In the world of football, you really have to invest in data gathering, understanding who your fan is, where he or she lives, what is their shirt size, who's their favorite player, are they able to travel to your stadium to watch them play? It's no different than we were in video games. Who's the gamer? What games are you playing? How often do you play? How willing are you to buy things digitally, virtually in there? And it's about data management. And it's about adding value in both instances to either playing the video game or watching and supporting your favorite football team. You can't monetize if you aren't giving value back here. So from that perspective, when I grew up watching football, as I mentioned, the business model of football was 50 pence pushed through a turnstile, a euro pushed through a turnstile. There was no football on television. There was no content development. There was no, it was very much you wait for your favorite football magazine once a month to learn more about your players. The game itself was scared about reaching out past the fans who were going to go to that stadium. It became very local, very tribal, and nothing wrong with that. For me, either going to watch Liverpool or later on in my life, Wrexham, where I lived later on after my dad and mom got a pub just outside of Wrexham. It was this ritual. And if I wasn't playing myself, I'm football completely enveloped my life in that respect. But the business model was how many pounds you can get through a turnstile, how many programs you can sell, and how many cups of awful tea and pork pies you can sell in the little shed behind the goal. That was the business model. Fast forward to today, and it's completely changed. It has had the opportunities, and it's globalized, very much globalized, and the ability for a club, certainly the lessons that I took from video games into Liverpool is to engage with those fans, whether they live within 100 yards of your stadium or 1,000 miles of your stadium.
Yeah. I was speaking with Michael Broughton a couple of months ago, and he was telling me, why, at the end of the day, why am I being treated differently? He told me, I'm a Flamengo supporter and I live in England. So why am I treated differently than someone who lives in Brazil? At the end of the day, support the club. Obviously there's some certain difference, but I should be able to enjoy or support the club in equal conditions, no? Which is, I think, what you're getting at. And I guess the key also to, you need to widen the funnel. Ideally, you would have your fans help you widen that funnel, which is, kind of like making that flight, no? So I'm just thinking now in that regard that the community aspect of video games is very big, because I can actually engage with other people and then, hey, why don't you just play with me? So that, I think that's another lesson. In terms of the future, though, do you think there will be continuing to play that role of accelerating football, or is there something going to change?
Absolutely. One of the things that we started to do at Electronic Arts in my later years there, before I left to go to Liverpool, was start thinking about football holistically, virtually and digitally, not just playing the game called FIFA at that time. How do you embrace everything about football that we as football fans, 24 hours a day, we go to sleep dreaming about football. We're anticipating the game the next day. We're either happy, sad, angry, frustrated, delighted, whatever we happen to be. And the power of what video games can now do graphically, the ubiquity of high-speed broadband, and the investment that EA now makes in the hundreds of millions of dollars every year in developing a football experience, not a video game experience, a football experience around everything that envelops the game. And the amount of money that EA invests, either with clubs or leagues or federations, community, grassroots, everything that EA is able to do, because this is a multi-billion-dollar game. And so to keep that level going, whether it's marketing dollars, investment dollars, research and development dollars, all of that has to come every single year, which it does for EA. And I think that, games will continue to evolve, and they will continue to blur the lines between what's virtual and digital and what's real. And it will also continue to replicate everything we feel in the real world about our team and our favorite players and the stadium we go to and the environment we sit after a game or before a game with our friends in the pub and talk about what's about to happen or talk about what just happened. And I can see in particular what EA Sports is doing to replicate those emotions past just hitting buttons and triggers and on the controller to play the game. And I think that is very much the future of how video games serves the real world of football.
I think I agree. I think at the end of the day, it seems destined to for them to actually not merge, but just be like in complete parallel, especially with the dynamics that you see today, with especially the younger generations of fans just relying on video games to actually be engaged to the game. And I think clubs should not deny this. So interesting. And I guess we can shift now to your time at Liverpool. But before we do, how did your experience in the video game industry actually prepare you for the role?
Well, they're somewhat similar. You're managing hundreds of millions of people's emotions on a daily basis. And again, it goes back to what I was saying, you've got to engage because if you're going to drive your business forward, both your video game business and your football club business, you've got to provide a reason for people not just to focus on you 90 minutes once or twice a week, but 24 hours a day, every waking hour they have thinking about you, seeing content, interviews with players, competitions, utilizing social media to get your messaging, your narrative, your anticipation. All of that is exactly what we were able to do in the world of video games. We had this advantage that we were, connected, through these fast, high-speed broadband connections all the time. So the amount of integration into their lives that we could do in video games was limitless. Football clubs a little bit more challenging and not necessarily directly connected. And what you have to do is a little bit of heavy lifting at your end in the club of giving reasons for people to come to your website, to engage in your mobile app, to buy merchandise, and to invest in some instances the once in a lifetime experience of getting on a plane and watching Flamengo or who happens it to be, that you remember for the rest of your life. And so these are the things that I took to Liverpool. And I will say much of that was already in motion. And I'd been already very close to the club prior to me actually being an employee of the club in a number of reasons, and was very aware of what they were doing in developing TV studios, content development. And we accelerated that once I got there with something we call Project Connect, which was connecting with their fans, whether they lived down the road or across the world. And this was very much an investment that our ownership group, Fenway Sports Group in Boston, Massachusetts, supported and funded, because we realized we're a very unique club in relation to who we are, and no disrespect to other clubs, but we have this massive global reach that is a legacy of success in the 70s and 80s. And wherever I went in the world, and still, if people recognize me anywhere in the world, talk not only passionately, but emotionally about what Liverpool Football Club means to them.
That to me is a key. I think emotions is a key word, because football is able to generate emotions and memories that very few industries can actually generate. Video games is the other. I always remember, for example, when I watched Spain win the World Cup, I always remember who I was with and where I was and who I watched it with. But at the same time, I also have one of the best memories I have with my little brother, actually, is how he would pick up a team in the video game. Most of the time it was Liverpool. And we kind of like build the game together and pick certain players and he would develop his career mode. Those type of emotions are actually there. And I'm not forgetting those, no? I guess, yeah. And also the capacity that both industries, if you will, are able to create loyal fans, no? But then the question here is, who is the fan? Because to your point, there's a local fan who supports the club, who feels the club as, their own, they're part of the community, they have like a deeper connection, if you will. But then you have the international fan. And I think I actually heard you say in an interview once that the international fan was actually the one driving higher LTV, lifetime value, no? And so in that sense, who is the real fan of the club?
Well, they're all real fans. And yes, bluntly and commercially, that the international fan on an LTV, lifetime value basis, may be more profitable. But without the local fan, without the atmosphere, and let's focus on Liverpool at Anfield, and without in my case, my dad or my granddad, this is multi-generational support. I'd have no choice in my life but being a red. Certainly it wasn't going to be a blue growing up in Liverpool. And without that fan, as we say, football without fans is nothing. And without that local fan, you don't have the international fan. You don't have these pilgrimages that I saw in my 3.5 years at Liverpool and walking around the stadium and talking to people from Spain and look, Uruguay when Luis Suarez was playing there, and now Japan because of Endo. I mean, and in particular Scandinavia, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, and you walk around Anfield, and it's this cacophony of international languages and big smiles on everybody's faces, as well as all the local fans you see every single game and have done for decades. And so the merging of them is important. It's also very delicate. It's also a challenge to everybody coexist and be very happy about their football club. And so, and I coined this phrase. It occurred to me straight away. We have this massive local heart, but we're powered by this kind of global pulse that drives revenues, drives engagement, does everything we need to do. So it's a balancing act that big football clubs have and need to have in which the local fan doesn't feel disjointed or disengaged by the international fan, and the international fan doesn't feel like your friend that supports Flamengo on the outside, kind of looking in a little bit. They're both incredibly important to the football club. And if you're going to be successful on the world's biggest stages, you've got to be a global football club. You have to have presence around the world. And, bluntly, very few do. I mean, it's maybe a dozen clubs where you could say you walk anywhere in the world, and you mention that club and people's eyes light up, or they say the players that are playing now or the history of the club. There's not a lot they're able to do that. Liverpool, fortunately, is one of those.
And to that point, Peter, then I want to know your opinion, because I once heard Javier Tebas, president of La Liga, say something along the lines that if you want to, at the end of the day, and I think you alluded to this before, you need to make fans or help them come as close to the game as possible. There's nothing closer to the game that actually games the game itself. Does it make sense then for clubs to actually play official games overseas? Because this is a conversation that we're seeing. The Premier League is having this conversation, La Liga is having this conversation. So what's your take on that?
Well, it's a delicate conversation because the local fan doesn't want to think that his season ticket is going to be diminished by at least a game because it's being played in New York City. And I totally get where the leagues are and even where the clubs are thinking about, and particularly here in the United States, this market which is exploding right now and having a game. But the flip side is that without those local fans, going back to where we're at, it would be incredibly expensive for many of them to get on a plane to New York City or even more so Los Angeles or here in California, for where I live, and they miss a game. And the time difference, I'm 9 hours behind you, is challenging as well. And the tax on the players of having to, got to come back and play the following week, in Newcastle or Aston Villa. So it's challenging. I was at EA Sports when the NFL really started to focus on London, Wembley in particular, of bringing at first exhibition games and then said, we're going to have proper games. We're going to have games that mean something. And I think that's different. I mean, that the NFL, ultimately 16, 17, maybe 18 games, depending on your, depending on how well your season goes. Huge squads and plenty of substitution in real time. It's different in Premier League, La Liga. And look, I get that the big leagues, La Liga, Premier League, Bundesliga, Liga, Serie A, all want to reach, particularly here into the American market. World Cup is coming here in 2 years. Everything is on fire here, whether it's Welcome to Wrexham or Ted Lasso or Messi playing, for Inter Miami. Everything is coming together here in the United States, unlike anything I've seen in the 40 plus years that I've lived here. But from the perspective of, you've got to focus on that local fan. So, will they miss a game? Do they have to get up like I do at 4 a.m. to watch again? So it's a real challenge. It was attempted a few years ago. infamous 39th game in the Premier League and was immediately shot down. So we shall see. I think that obviously the Premier League and La Liga will be, I think, the pioneers in this if they dare do it. But having said that, as somebody here in America that is used to getting up at all times of the day and night to watch a game, the coverage here is spectacular for the big leagues. I mean, there's not many games that we can't watch. We get all of the teams coming over here: Barcelona, Real Madrid, Liverpool, Manchester United, Chelsea, Wrexham. Yeah, and so we get to see them. The fact that the game is not a legitimate game at times, I think most of the more sophisticated American fans understand the challenges that the teams would have coming over. They like to see the teams. Again, this summer, there's going to be half a dozen Premier League teams. Wrexham are coming over to play here. Barbara, where I live, against the Premier League team, Bournemouth. We see plenty of football. MLS growing, so, and our coverage here is superior. I always laugh when I go back to England and the 3:00 games are blacked out. We watch every game here, but there's no blackout here. So I think it'll be a few years before either Premier League or La Liga has the courage to try this again and face the backlash that certainly the 39th game got a few years ago when the Premier League attempted it.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I guess the key is that you see, quote unquote, soccer become embedded in culture. So you said it before, right? It's not only Messi going to the league or the increasing quality in the MLS, but you see Ted Lasso, you see Wrexham. Everything is just more than just soccer itself, no? Which is interesting. But then on the other side is, okay, you see the NFL, they're starting going international. You see the NBA, they're starting going international. So right now, on one hand, you have some other sports properties doing this, so it makes sense that football is considering this. But then the opportunity to tap into, in this case, the American market is there. And if La Liga doesn't take it, probably Premier League. And then if not, it's not them, it's got to be someone.
But I think the question, do you need to play a legitimate game here on U.S. soil for it to continue to grow? Or do you do what you're currently doing? Superb coverage of the game, almost 24/7, not only games, shoulder programming, teams coming over all the time to play and train. You're going to have a World Cup here in 26 that will continue to engender love and understanding of the game, which then can be reinterpreted back when World Cup is over, back into Premier League and La Liga. And the logistics, again, I'll go back to what I think of it as a club. All right, so you say 2 games have to be played here. Maybe El Clasico is played here. But then Barcelona and Real Madrid got to go back to Spain the day after and go play Atletico Madrid or Sevilla or Villarreal away from home, jet lag, exhaustion. And then they'll start complaining, wait, the other teams didn't have to do this. Why do we do this? Once again, we're carrying the burden of the league on our shoulders. I mean, I've heard all the arguments. So there will be a lot to be thought through. And you've got to engage with the fans. Did they feel they need to see a real game in real life for them to continue to love and grow the sport here? Personally, I don't think so. And the number of people, even here in a relatively small city like Santa Barbara, the number of people who fly over for a weekend to see a game or two, not a big deal. And they would much rather go to the Bernabeu or go to San Siro or go to Camp Nou or go to Anfield or go to Old Trafford or go to the Emirates Stadium than watch a game in a redeployed NFL stadium here, which is what they do. So I think you've got to take all of these things into account. Look, I'm sure the conversations are being had every day, at Premier League headquarters, at La Liga headquarters, but I think there's a lot of implications and consequences to this, not the least of which the fans will just say, no, this is not on. And the clubs may even push back themselves to say, we don't need to go over there. And maybe maybe we win over there, but we come back and we're so tired and jet lagged that we don't have time for preparation and recovery, that we get beaten. And maybe, and the only way you get around that is to give those teams returning an extra, 3-4 days off. And then that creates fixture congestion later on in the season. So all of the implications have to be thought through.
The complexity of football is that
Totally.
You're mixing competitions. So the NFL, it's its own competition. But what happens when you need to adapt the calendar of a national league and an international competition like could be a UEFA Champions League? So imagine you had Real Madrid going to play Cadiz last weekend over in the US, and then they have to come back and now they have to play Bayern. It's so complex. So I agree. I mean, there's a lot to talk there, and this could do for a whole other podcast.
But I think the fundamental, do you need to do it to continue to grow the game? And I don't think you do.
No, and also the business, not only the game, but also the business side of things, and which kind of ties with one question that I wanted to ask you later, which is I was speaking with the marketing director at Bologna a couple of weeks ago in the podcast, and I think he had an interesting take, and I wanted to see your opinion on this, which is we understand that the match day revenue is never going to be our biggest source of income. It's a reality because it's limited capacity. But it is true that it does drive commercial revenue, because obviously if we have, the stadium is full, we can sell partners that, we have an engaged fan base, and also broadcasting, because broadcasters would rather pay for a competition that has attendances, right? Do you agree with that?
Well, as I mentioned, the business model of football used to be entirely match day revenue. There was no TV because TV, the fear was if you put a game on television, nobody would go watch it in real life. Now, we laugh at that when we think about it now, but that was always the fear. Growing up in England, I saw one game a year on television, the FA Cup final at Wembley. That was it.
Wow.
You want to go watch football? You get on the train, you hitch a ride with your friends to the stadium, and you go watch football live. And the business model is flipped. But the ability and investment in stadiums is critical, and we're seeing that. You're certainly seeing that in Spain with both the Barcelona and Real Madrid investments in their stadiums. Match day revenue is critical because it provides a platform for the sponsors and advertisers that is unparalleled. It's this massive canvas of the environment and obviously the LEDs in stadium activation for sponsors and advertisers. It's absolutely critical. And you're seeing clubs here in England, two clubs that jump to mind straight away that got a challenge in this area is Manchester United and Chelsea, with Old Trafford and Stamford Bridge, respectively. They're falling behind in match day revenues. And again, once you start doing that, do sponsors look at you a little differently? Does the virtuous cycle of football start to crack at the seams of you win more games, more sponsors come in, sponsors write bigger checks, you take that money, you invest in better players win even more games, even bigger sponsors come in, writing even bigger checks, which allows you to buy even better players. And so you have this virtuous cycle of professional football. But match day revenues are critical. And certainly my experience at Liverpool was we invested heavily in our stadium environment, tried to get our fans in a little earlier than they typically would like to do, because traditionally they all hang out in the pubs around the stadium and have their pint, as their dad did and their granddad did, in the same pubs. And then with 15 minutes to kick off, everybody rushes to the stadium. Well, we tried to change that behavior a little bit, but it's very important. I mean, and the match day revenues, whilst not huge, they're certainly material for the big clubs because they fuel all the other revenues. And the interesting thing that I always remarked upon being at Liverpool is that when you talk to fans around the world, they would say, they wouldn't say, I'd love to watch Liverpool play. They say, I want to come to Anfield. And that's a nuance, but it's very important. They come, they want to see the stadium. They want to be in the pubs. They want to hear the fans, the excitement. Hear "You'll Never Walk Alone." Go see the statue of Bill Shankly or Bob Paisley. Go pay their respects to the 97 people that died at Hillsborough, at the Hillsborough Memorial. and you go see the Shankly, environment, the Paisley environment, the things that we did deliberately at Liverpool and continue to do to have this unbelievable experience that like American stadiums, you get there hours in advance and soak it all up. And I think it's very important. You look at clubs like Chelsea and Manchester United with, like, say, Stamford Bridge and Old Trafford, and they're struggling a little bit in driving both that experience as well as those revenues. So match day revenues are absolutely critical in driving all the other revenues.
That's part of the brand, that experience that you get, no? So, and tying to the brand is the emotions, going back to what we were discussing at the beginning. The set of emotions you get from being at the stadium, even if it's a once in a lifetime thing for someone, at the end of the day, I'm going to cherish this memory forever. And this is something I was also discussing with Fidesz Lekmanan from Borussia Dortmund, which is another stadium that, it has that allure, so it does drive, I think I agree, it drives everything else, and it's part of the essence of the brand, no? Would you say, though, that the traditional sports business model then is outdated? Meaning, do we need to find new sources of growth for football clubs?
Ultimately, yeah. As I said, the stadium is a platform where your team plays. It's a platform for advertisers and sponsors to activate against their huge investments in these football clubs. And the business model, though, is still very much focused maybe on the 50,000 people that show up, and not on the 50 million that around the world have a passion. And you can only enhance that opportunity through digital investment, whether it's mobile apps, websites. Content becomes king. And this is something certainly we learned in video games about how you tease the anticipation. And in our case, again, whether it's, in the case of video game, a Call of Duty or a EA Sports FC, you build anticipation, and therefore you build community. And the same in football. I mean, again, at Liverpool, we developed LFC TV. We built, prior to my time, TV studios. We invested in a brand new training facility right next to the academy. And part of that was a media center and a content development environment that allowed the TV crews that are part of the LFC media teams to develop content, to sit, have interviews and do fun stuff and humanize the players. If you follow Liverpool, every day there's something that Virgil van Dijk is doing, or that Trent Alexander-Arnold is doing, or some of the younger players that are coming through that are really getting the fans excited. And in my day, you knew nothing about your heroes. You knew nothing other than a newspaper article, a photograph in Shoot magazine or 442 magazine, and maybe the odd television interview. But other than that, you really knew nothing about them. And maybe that was for the better. That they're your heroes, and they come out and they score goals and they save goals, and that's all you really needed to know. In today's world, we want to know everything. We want to know everything. And so, yes, we have the ability as football clubs to provide that human side. Players understand that they have personal brands, that they have the power through their social media accounts to create their own persona. They also understand they need to be bigger than the club they are playing for. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, but you need a brand so that if you go to, which often they do, get transferred to a different club, you sometimes take some of the fans with you a little bit that want to continue to follow you, even though they're not fans of that club. They're fans of you and what you do. And the importance, which we certainly at Liverpool, when we educated them on the trials and tribulations of social media, is building that personal brand as well as using it for good. The social impact they can have in their community, and making sure that these very wealthy young men certainly have the opportunity to recognize how lucky they are in relation to the average fan who pays their wages, as simple as that, and to give back to that community or give back to a cause that they feel, in particular, very focused upon and is important in their life. And I think that was something that I hope you see with Liverpool and their young players in particular. You may have read a story about when they're in the academy, they're not allowed to drive particular cars. They're not allowed, there's, you leave your phone when you walk in, and it's about focus. And it's about keeping you grounded that you're 18 and you shouldn't be driving a $250,000 Ferrari, and even if maybe you can afford it, I don't know, but it's not the right thing to do. It's not reflective of the people that pay your wages, who maybe are on minimum wage and that save up to go to a game. And it was a very important part, and is a very important part of, if you will, the Liverpool way. And I think it pays dividends ultimately, because the fans will rally around. They love seeing young players come on. One of the great things about the Jurgen Klopp era is the utilization of academy players, young teenagers coming on and getting the Jurgen Klopp hug and the big smile before they came on with 10 minutes to go to make their first team debut at Anfield wearing the liver bird on their chest. Very important part of the culture of the club. Fans love it because they can relate. Particularly young lads from Liverpool. This year, a few local Liverpudlians have been able to break into the first team for a game or two. And fans love that. And they're going to relate bluntly more to that player than the player that was bought for £100 million somewhere else.
Agree. And it's a matter of values. At the end of the day, going back to what we were discussing about the brand, no? And the power of the brand for a football club also relies on the values that it's able to transmit, and how fans in different parts of the world actually resonate with those values. And in today's world, the reality is that the players are kind of like, if you will, the personalized representation, or the humanization, if you will, of the values of the club. And I guess going back to what you were mentioning at the beginning, in today's world also, people actually relate more to people, which is why they follow more the players themselves than the actual clubs, which at the end of the day is a new source of content that they need to consider. Clubs meaning, right? How different players are going to help them attract new fans from different parts of the world or different segments of fans. And in that regard, how have you seen the evolution of content during your career to the point we are now?
Very early on in video games, we determined that content is king. Software drives hardware, which means experiences are more important than the device, which is a dumb piece of equipment. But the real magic source is the content that goes into it. And so the idea of, again, back to video games, in the old days, when I was at Sega, and even in the early days of Xbox, we wouldn't share anything with our community as regards information about the game. It was kept very secretive, and everything was under wraps. And if the community behaved itself, we'd show them a screenshot, or we'd talk a little bit about what we were anticipating a year out with that game. Fast forward to where games are now, and they realize that you start sharing as soon as you're building this game, and you share some of the challenges, and realizing it, you build community so that by the time the game is ready to launch, there's this huge sense of anticipation. There's this huge sense of, man, I've seen all of a little, what we call in games, a vertical slice, if you will, which is, this is the gameplay. These are the characters. This is the environments and the maps, as we call it in games, that you're going to be playing in. And that is very different than it was when I first got involved in video games. Now, look, the platforms to be able to deliver that stuff are there. They weren't there before. I joined video games when it was still offline. There was, until we launched the Sega Dreamcast, there was no online gaming. So no real opportunity other than magazines to be able to interact with your community. And magazines coming out once a month in a world of real time content and experience, it really doesn't work. And so, um, look where we are today. And it's all about getting that community built, engaging that community back to acquire, engage, and then ultimately monetize. And that's where we're at. So I think football clubs, I know football clubs understand this. Again, it's very difficult if you're only, on show 90 minutes once, maybe twice a week plus added time, very difficult to engage. But you develop content, you humanize the players, you invest in infrastructure that can do that. Not only are your fans in your town, but all around the world start to have interest. And to your point, yeah, I mean, kind of the Messi Ronaldo phenomenon of the last 10, 15 years has changed the dynamic a little bit where we do follow players with interest. Now, look, I'm in awe of a lot of players, but I'm not going to support their football club if they go somewhere else. It's just not going to happen. But I still, when I think of, the great Liverpool team when I was there, Bobby Firmino, Sadio Mane, Gini Wijnaldum, these players, I still smile when I see them and check on them and how are they doing? And I don't care about their club, but I just hope these guys are doing okay and their families are doing well and that it's been a good move for them. And then I will, like any other football fan, still watch in awe of Messi, even in a league like MLS, tearing it up. Luis Suarez, and joining him and playing. So we all have that fondness for players, if not the fondness for the club that they go and move on to.
Yeah, I was actually listening to an interview with Xavier Asensi from Inter Miami, and he was mentioning that somebody asked him from Madrid, actually asked him, not the club, the city, someone living in Madrid, finally I can buy a Messi kit after so many years, so that goes to the power of the player itself. But something that was interesting then you said before is the role of content. I think content also creates that mental availability, meaning it keeps top of mind within the fans' mind, right? And I think that's the main evolution, and that could be the next source of revenue for football clubs. If you look at Manchester City, for example, they have their own content media facility, they have a studio, and I'm thinking this could be and I want to know your opinion, but to me, that's kind of like the future, creating that content because they are the source of unique content that they can only generate and stories and emotions. It's just a matter of them finding the correct business model, if you will. I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, the business model becomes YouTube subscriptions. In the case of Liverpool, you subscribe to exclusive content on LFC TV Go, which I still, I pay my £7 a month, whatever I pay to see content that's being developed that's exclusive to subscribers. There's the huge opportunity to do so. A lot of it as well, driving merchandise sales through innovative content. When big clubs launch new kits, as Liverpool did last week, their new Nike kit for next year, big photo shoots, video content showing behind the scenes. And this becomes key. And your advertisers and your sponsors love it because you're putting them front and center as well. One of the great things, which I still watch to this day, that we developed at Liverpool is called, Inside Outfield, which is utilizing cameras that the broadcasters let you, which is not easy, which let you develop your own content outside of your broadcasting agreement with, in the UK, whether it's a Sky Sports or a TNT. And we found places without being intrusive to the players in the tunnel, post game, that we were able to develop without infringing upon intellectual property that had been sold to the broadcasters, develop content that would come out 2-3 days after the game that gave you that little behind the scenes peek that people are fascinated with in today's world. And go past sports, go look at the things we watch on our streaming services, the Netflixes as well. And so much of it is how do things work and stuff that you couldn't have access to in the old days. Now you go, this is the behind the scenes, how things happen. And people are fascinated with that. And then you add the passion of sports to that. eavesdropping on conversations as the two teams gather in the tunnel, and players across the aisle in the tunnel recognize each other. They may have played, particularly the international players, give each other a hug, a little whisper in the ear, and before they go out and do combat. That is the stuff that fans love. And that is the stuff that you can utilize either directly or indirectly to monetize your fan base through, you place advertising against it, but you offer stuff like that up as part of your sponsorship package. And that's where you can leverage a greater revenue out of sponsors, because it's not just here's your name on the shirt, or here's 2 minutes per game on the LED boards, but it's activation behind the scenes. It's utilization of these players who are gods to their fans, and therefore utilizing them to bluntly sell your product it is a very viable platform for success.
That was a great masterclass. Thank you, Peter. But the reality is that football has more than the business side of it. And I was actually speaking with the director of impact at Liverpool Football Club just last week. We'll be publishing that episode if you haven't done so already when this comes out. He had an interesting sentence, which is something along the lines that football club or football in general has the responsibility, but also the opportunity to create social impact. So I was going to ask about your opinion and how can clubs do that?
Well, he's exactly right. And I think we at Liverpool have known that for many, many, many years. The power of the badge is immense. And by that, I mean, clubs, if they haven't already do so, need a philanthropic arm of the community. You can't just take from a community without giving back. And that platform that you have, which is that badge you wear, that tracksuit you walk into a classroom with, or onto a football pitch with kids who don't have the money to play, and utilizing the power of football for good is immense. At Liverpool, we have the LFC Foundation, a multi-million-pound operation that uses the power of the Liverbird to be able to open doors and help people with the clear issues that a lot of working class cities, which Liverpool fundamentally is, have. On top of that, prior to my arrival, but certainly I got very involved, was this concept of a group called Red Neighbors that looked at all of the challenges that the community around the stadium, like a lot of old English stadiums, it was built in the city because the working class Victorian man had no transportation, and maybe transportation didn't even exist, so that when they finished their shift down the coal mine or in the factory on a Saturday morning, they could then walk to the stadium, which is right in the middle of the residential area. And Red Neighbors was all about supporting the 3 postcodes, L4, L5, L6, that surround the stadium. And with the challenge they had, social isolation, food insecurity, education, motivation for kids living in some of the most impoverished postcodes in the United Kingdom. So you have all of that. On top of that, when I arrived in Liverpool, I started to see the impact in the first few weeks of months of what football could do in a city like this. And I founded my own personal charity, the Peter Moore Foundation, in which we looked at these issues, and in particular focused on some of the real issues. I was very fortunate to be able to, if you will, celebrate my mom and dad, who have been long gone, but my mom was a nurse at a children's hospital in Liverpool, and fund treatment rooms with her photograph as an 18-year-old nurse outside, which gave me great pride. My dad imbued the love of Liverpool in me, and it funded teaching rooms in some of the tougher areas around Anfield with his photograph outside those conference rooms. And so my ability to give back, because I've been fortunate in life, and video games has given me a good career, I knew straight away that was an obligation. Plus, being born and bred in Liverpool, for me, was a very powerful springboard. If you use the characteristics of Liverpudlians, which I did, a very powerful springboard for success in life, should you choose to embrace that. So social impact in football is immense. It's a massive massive requirement as far as I'm concerned. Even here in Santa Barbara Football Club that I founded and own in USL, the moment we founded the club, we also founded Fundación Cielo, the Sky Foundation, and funded it straight away to, as wealthy as this community is, like any wealthy community, there are pockets which need help. And there's no greater platform, particularly here where we have this magnificent integration of Hispanic communities that have been here for hundreds of years, and the ability for us to be able to help through the power of football those families which have served this community for literally hundreds of years. And so that would be our focus here in Santa Barbara in the coming seasons through our philanthropic arm, Fundación Cielo.
Actually, I was going to ask about that because I wanted to understand the goals behind Santa Barbara Sky FC. And I guess to me, because it has this, strong community support initiative behind it. I guess what I want to know is why this project and why was now the moment to actually pursue it?
Yeah, you come to the stage in your life where you're obliged to give back, and you give back through the platforms where you have best chance of success. And when I left Liverpool at the very end of 2020, my wife and I moved here to Santa Barbara, where I had not lived before, but she had many years ago and loved it. And pretty quickly after we moved here, USL, the league that sits just underneath MLS in the football pyramid here in the United States, reached out and say, look, we see Santa Barbara as a huge opportunity for USL. Can you help us, establish, a platform to build a full-on professional football club here? So I said, yes, I'll be an engaged minority owner, my infamous words, but pretty quickly I got very involved, founding the club, working with friends and volunteers here to get this going, writing the checks to get everything going, and focus on what we could do here in this community to take advantage. It's very much a soccer town. The more I got to know it, American football of huge note has been played here for many years. The university is a soccer and basketball university, University of California, Santa Barbara. We have a magnificent stadium, soccer-specific stadium, 17,000 seater. And so all of our work. But for me, it was like talking to people here. It's the classic conversation. You talk to the young players and what do you want to do? Who do you want to play for? I want to play for the LA Galaxy. I'm thinking, why do you want to play for Santa Barbara? I want to go to Los Angeles. So establishing that career path, if you will, or the aspiration path. Look, as a kid, I'd run around and kick a tennis ball down the street because I wanted to play for Liverpool. And, I was never going to be good enough to play for Liverpool, but like millions of people, you aspire to that. And that aspiration then builds character and builds objectives and builds a sense of who you are, what you want to do in your life. And football has that very unique capability. We live and dream, we hope. Pretty quickly you realize you're not going to play at the level you're at. But I found my level. I played in the Welsh National League and still to this day have friends 50 years ago that I played with that still I stay in contact with. And you build lifetime relationships through the power of football.
Again, goes back to the emotions that only football can create, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, totally.
Interesting. And how are you, any special initiatives that you guys are doing to kind of to me, football is a common language, if you will. And I've heard it from other leaders. So any specific actions you guys are doing?
Well, I think, we start playing March of next year. Brand new football club. It's not like Europe or South America or Asia, but the clubs have been around for 100 years. And if they haven't, some other club has taken their place 50 years ago or whatever. This is brand new to have a professional sports team, a full-time professional sports team, both men and women here in Santa Barbara. And I think that, every day we're learning, we're engaging the community. We see huge opportunities here, game day in particular, to create a very American view of what football is, which is very family-oriented. Come a couple of hours before kickoff, we've got to have a kids area. So it's a very different environment here. This is not Liverpool. This is not any of the downtown areas you see in Europe, we have this ability, beautiful stadium, close to the beach, magnificent weather throughout. You can do just about anything. So it's about, and then the engagement very early on, I brought the key members of the Hispanic community to my home and spent an evening with them explaining what I felt we all together should be able to do here in this city, and to build a legacy that our grandchildren and great-grandchildren would love. I mean, I go back to the days of Liverpool being founded by John Holding in 1892, who never would have dreamt the impact that his football club would. And he used to have Everton, and Everton played at Anfield. If you know the history of Liverpool, and kicked him out because they wouldn't pay the rent, and formed his own club called Liverpool Football Club. And never would have dreamt 130, 140 years on the impact that his actions and his development of that club would have. And I like to think 140 years from now that Santa Barbara Sky FC will have that same impact on the community that Liverpool did during those days.
Oh, that would be great. Hopefully we'll see that happen. No, Peter, I want to be respectful of your time. And if I kind of just want to ask a few rapid fire questions before we wrap up. And now you're speaking about community. I heard an interesting framework from you about the role that a CEO in a football club should have, which is, the 4 C's: commercial, community, civic, and culture. Correct me if I'm wrong in any of those. Which one would be, for you at least, the number one priority? Because all of them are important. And let's be clear on that. But is there any one that you would prioritize?
Has to be community. I mean, community builds everything from there. The commercial relationships. If you've built a massive community, commercial sponsors are very interested in you for the obvious reasons. You build culture around that community, both within the club and the supporters themselves. And then, you have this concept of again, we said it, football without fans is nothing. If you don't have that community, or even worse, that community turns against you because you haven't built the underpinnings where you're not judged by winning and losing, but deeper institutional, multi-generational love. Look, you love it when your team wins, but if you're a fan that if your team continues to lose, you go find somewhere else. Well, you were never part of that community in the first place. So, and then building the culture, leveraging that culture into commercial, the impact we have on the city of Liverpool, and I say we, Liverpool Football Club, the commercial impact civically in the hundreds of thousands of people every year that visit the city to at first watch football and then fall in love with the city and come back again for the city. We did an economic impact report, which I would encourage all clubs to do, to understand the economic impact they have on their community. And when they have home games, what does that do for taxi drivers and restaurant owners and things of that nature, and the sales tax that they drive. And then maybe the tourism and commerciality. Look, I could absolutely guarantee you there in Spain that people will come over for watch Real Madrid or Barcelona or Atletico or Villarreal or Sevilla, you name it. But they don't just go out for one game. They want to enjoy Spain. They want to enjoy the cities that they visit. So it becomes this more holistic view that they're going to spend at Camp Nou or the Bernabeu, but man, they're going to spend in restaurants. They're going to drink a lot of Spanish wine and eat a lot of paella and stay in hotel rooms. So understanding the economic impact you had civically on your city is important for football clubs. And we within the first year I was there, we retained Deloitte to do a complete analysis, not only in Liverpool, but actually the north of England and the UK with our suppliers and vendors and tourism and airlines and everything, that this massive ecosystem that top class football clubs have. And they rely upon these clubs for their income and livelihood.
Yeah. Wow. That was a great answer. And I'm just thinking here how community at the end of the day is kind of like the driver of everything else, just like we were speaking about before about the stadium experience. But at the end of the day, it's all a part of the community, whether if I'm a fan at a stadium, I'm with my community of fans, if you will. But then I'm also, I think everything ties together, no? And Peter, I want to get your opinion on this because last year at World Football Summit, we launched a rebrand, which basically we call for an industry that is more professional, that embraces innovation, that commits to sustainability across its three pillars, whether it's financial, social, and environmental. We try to summarize this claim in a sentence that says, the football we want, the football we need. So if I were to ask you in one or two sentences about the football you want and the football you need, what would you say?
Well, the football I want is winning football. The football I want is entertaining, that it takes me away from my day-to-day troubles and tribulations, that is a release for me for 90 minutes plus whatever time the referee chooses to add on. And it's always been that way. That's the football I want. The football that I, in school, doodled about when my mind was wandering in class about my favorite players and drawing stick figures of my players. That's the football I want. The football I need, or the football we need, is sustainable, that provides positive social impact to the community it serves, that is fundamentally leaves that community in a better place, that is not focused purely on the commercial aspects, but on the community building culture, as they say, and having a very positive impact on the civic elements of that community they play in. So that's what we need. The commercialization of the game is important, but it's got to be done in a way that serves its community rather than serves bluntly the owners for whatever objectives they may have in owning a football club.
Yeah, that's terrific. Very good. Two final questions, Peter. One, after such a varied career, because you've been all over the place, you've seen everything in football and in entertainment, in the video game industry. Is there any moment that you're most proud of?
Personal pride is interesting. I've been very fortunate from early on in my career, selling soccer shoes to as an immigrant here in America for Patrick, a great brand that you've got to be at a certain age to remember Patrick's. But I think, it's a personal thing, but the courage to be an immigrant, to leave my job as a physical education teacher in the UK, to have the courage and my own convictions, to come to America when I was 26 years of age. I always wanted to be a PE teacher. That's all I ever wanted to be. But I got a taste of America. I thought I can make it here. I can, and why? And look, and so you take stock of yourself, and like every immigrant has to do fundamentally. Because when I arrived in America in the very early '80s, it was not easy for me. I was born in Liverpool, so I've got that Liverpudlian personality. My dad had a pub, so very early on in my life, I was interacting with adults in the pub and giving my dad a break and serving beers way younger than I should have done as part of giving him the opportunity to take a break upstairs in the pub in which we lived. So my confidence around people grew enormously. Being a teacher, and particularly a physical education teacher, which is fundamentally making 35 boys 8 times a freaking day do something they don't necessarily want to do, which is get out in the snow and play rugby or play football, and having that ability to do it. And when I came, and I could kick a ball straight. I was not a great player. I was a good player, but I was not a great player. So you go, all right, what have I got? And I came to America to coach and play, and that wasn't going to pay the bills ultimately, particularly 40 plus years ago. And so I thought, all right, I'm going to get involved in the soccer business, and I think I can leverage who I am selling shoes door to door. When I say door to door, going into town, this is way before the internet, way before anything. Going into towns, going and look at the yellow pages, figure out where the retailers were, knocking on their door. Hi, I represent Patrick. You may not have heard of us. We're great shoes from France. Michel Platini, Kevin Keegan, Jean-Pierre Papin, Andreas Bremer, blah, blah, blah. That's who we are. And selling shoes and convincing them because of me and great product, but I'm going to convince you to give me a go because I know these shoes will sell. And so I think, I think pride of being an immigrant, establishing yourself in a foreign country, learning a language. I know it sounds like English, but it's different. And establishing myself here and forming the basis for what's to. I've been very fortunate and lucky and made some decisions and moved into video games at the right time and then had this amazing circle of life to come back to be CEO of my football club, my dad's football club, my granddad's football club. And I wish they were alive to see that.
Wow. Thank you for that. That's an incredible journey, but I really liked that you went back to the beginning. And actually early in my career, I worked for Avon Cosmetics. So I know the challenge of going door to door, trying to sell products, So wow. And you know what? To your point, I think that built a character that has, been with you throughout the career and overcome challenges. And it's been super helpful. No? Peter, thank you so much. Before we go, what are your expectations for World Football Summit Americas?
I'm looking forward to it. It's only a couple of months ago, I was down in Mexico City speaking at a video game conference with great friends of mine that they're at EGS there in Mexico City, Electronic Games, so that have built a great conference and a great community around video games in Mexico City. And it's amazing city. Obviously, video games are one thing. Football in Mexico City, whole different story. So I'm looking forward to seeing you, all my friends there at World Football Summit, maybe adding a little bit of value to what already looks like an amazing agenda. Did I see there's like 100 speakers already and panelists? So it's going to be great. And I can't wait. And I'm going to come down, not just for the conference, but to enjoy Mexico City and everything that it has to offer. All of the things that we missed a few months ago. And my wife is half Mexican, so we have got we've got that roots, and so we're very, very looking forward to visiting Mexico City. Video games last time, football this time.
Well, let's see which one is better, no? But we're definitely looking forward to welcoming you to not only to the event but to the city as well.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be soon enough. So Peter, I don't know if there's anything else you want to share with the audience, any last words?
I mean, it just goes back to what we were just talking about. No matter where you are in your life, and I did a TED talk a number of years ago in Liverpool where I talked about many of the things that we have discussed here today, Jaime. And it's like, and it finished with this one sentence that occurred to me that I wrote: you've got to embrace your roots, because from there grow the boughs that define who you are as a human being. And I've always embraced being from Liverpool. Look, I left Liverpool in 1965. But I'm a Liverpudlian. I'm a Scouser, as we call ourselves. And for the audience, you've got to embrace your roots and take from that all of those attributes, no matter where you were born, no matter, your parental support, which we all get, and run with that. And that becomes the key to success in life is embracing that, not somehow distancing yourself or not giving credit to your parents and to your friends and to the people that put you on their shoulders a little bit early on in life and gave you that head start. So embrace your roots.
I couldn't have thought of a better way to end the conversation, and I truly mean that, because I needed to hear that, to be honest, on a personal level. And I'm sure anybody listening will get value from that as well. Peter, thanks so much for this great conversation.
Yeah.
I look forward to having more in the future, seeing you in Mexico City in a few weeks, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And there you have him, Peter Moore. Wow. I had very high expectations for this conversation, and I must admit I'm blown away. Not only because of all of the lessons from a business perspective, which we're going to try to summarize in a little bit, but also because of his love for the game and his conviction that football represents more than just a business. It, as we were discussing with the guys from Liverpool, it's an opportunity, but also a responsibility to drive a greater good, right? Anyway, the main takeaways for me, and they're full of them, but at the end of the day, when you think about it, is, the emotions that only football can generate, whether at Liverpool, or at whatever club you work at or you support, So at the end of the day, how can you leverage the power of those emotions to engage a community and to actually drive revenue? And not only engaging with fans directly, but it's those emotions that also are able to help you connect with partners. You know, um, think about the inverted funnel that he was mentioning from the video game. So how can you reach new fans, engage with them, but then also convert and drive revenue opportunities? No, in that regard, you know, the stadium experience, as we have mentioned before, is key to generate those emotions. But that's also going to be the driver of commercial opportunities again, because sponsors are going to be willing to invest in clubs that have engaged fan base, and also from broadcasters because they want to see a fan base that's willing to attend those matches, and they're going to assume that's an interesting, if you will, a competition team, whatever you're in. I also liked our conversation about how content can actually be the next pillar of the sports business model. Because if you think about it, football properties are in a unique position to create stories and content that no other industry or entertainment medium can create, right? If you think about it. And in that new world, the players are going to be key because they are the ones that are transmitting the most authentic stories. But as Peter said, they also need to be aware of their personal brand and how they can create positive social impact. Not only are going to help acquire new fans for the club, and then it's going to be the club's responsibility to actually go down that funnel, engage and convert, but also using the players as a way to create social impact. No? And it's really, that's all what football should be about, giving back to the community. At the end of the day, he said it, community was his number one priority as the CEO of Liverpool. So you had commercial, civic, culture, and community. And it's giving back to the community, engaging with the community. If there's no fans, there's no party, if you will, right? And it's also going to help you drive economic impact around that community. So it's a driver for so many things. So keep that in mind. It's a brand, it's emotions, it's stories, it's community. And yeah, embrace your roots, as he said at the end. What else can you say about that? Anyway, let me know your thoughts. I don't know if anything else stood out to you. As always, if there's something there, just make sure you reach out on social media. And before we go, don't forget to subscribe and rate the podcast on your platform of choice. It does help us so much when you share with your industry colleagues because it helps us bring amazing guests like Peter. So please help us out on that. And nothing else from my side. I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the World Football Summit podcast. Hopefully we'll see you next time, and have a great rest of your day.